Raz,
Michael,
we're back.
we're back.
Thanks for coming home.
You look fresh.
I'm okay. I'm fired up. I've been listening to Sleep Token.
You sleep
Long story.
token, man.
I get fired up on the way to the podcast.
I don't know if you ever heard about sleep token.
Clearly, I'm missing out.
I heard that 5 minutes ago for the first
modern
time.
Right.
death metal. It's definitely not your thing.
I was thinking like sleeping app.
No, it's not at all.
My brain had gone somewhere
That's why the name throws
totally
everybody.
out. Oh, wow.
Sleep Token. Favorite song right now, Caramel. Thank you, Chris.
Okay.
Williamson.
Are these
Nikki.
people?
Oh, sorry. I knew I was going to make a mistake.
People do it all the time.
Mimi
You
Nicklin.
can keep that in the edit.
I'll
Do you
just
know
say,
how-
it's not going
Do you know
to go out.
how many people call me Nikki?
That's why I said I should only say Mimi and then I wouldn't do
Mimi.
this. So Mimi Nicklin,
Mimi. There we go.
famous author, 2 books.
Yeah.
We already agreed I'm going to write the cover note
I'm
for
ready.
book number 3.
And
Is
put
there a
my
name for book
signature.
3 yet?
There is the
There?
connection prescription.
Nice.
Yeah.
Mm,
2
I
more
like
months.
it.
Yeah.
I
Thank
like
you.
it.
And
I
it's
like
your
it too.
second book that's kind of gone big.
It's doing well.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can get it in Singapore now, which I'm super proud of.
Where?
On
Kino?
Amazon.
Amazon.
Oh, Amazon.
Yeah.
I want to say
Obviously.
Amazon.
In Kino? Have you found it in
where?
Kino?
No, but it is there.
Got
I
it.
haven't been. I just got
I'll
it.
go find it and take a photo. I did this with Rob
Yeah,
Beer's book.
photos.
Just like, hi.
I used to do it more. Now I'm a
Yeah.
bit like more shy.
It's how we got him on the show. I went to Kino, found the book, took a photo, sent it to him, said, you got to come on the show. I have your book. And he said, yes.
Amazing.
And he came.
Yeah.
There we go. Good story.
So you live in Malaysia. You took the shuttle bus over today, otherwise
the
known as
sky.
the airplane.
Yep.
You've been in Malaysia a while. How
3.5
long?
years.
Got it.
But I've been in Asia longer.
Where else?
Where else? I lived here for a while. I lived
Singapore?
here for about 2.5 years.
Oh, cool.
Mm.
I lived in Sri Lanka for about 2 years. Hong Kong, Dubai, South Africa, not Asia, but while I've been away. So it's been 19 years basically of traveling around this Middle East Asia region.
And
Wow.
what landed you to stay in Malaysia?
I love Malaysia. I feel like I should probably be their cheerleader. Like the government should
You can go
probably
ahead.
hire me,
Yeah. We'll see if we get a promotional
Um,
spot.
We can
Yeah,
call,
exactly.
we can call
The
them if you
tourism
want.
board.
Direct.
Hey, there's this girl.
Yeah.
No, listen, it's a fantastic place to live, actually. It's very similar to Singapore in terms of lifestyle. That kind of, you can choose whether you want to be in a high-end restaurant or a hawker center, that mix of worlds.
Yeah.
But of course, Malaysia is just cheaper
It
by a
is.
long way.
Yeah.
So we love life there. I set up my business there, great education, great infrastructure. My family's happy. Life's good.
And you find it still supports kind of doing these global things that you do there well?
Yeah, it does because I'm on the plane most of the time and it's got a good airport, right? So I can get in and out very
That's
easily,
debatable,
very
but
comfortable.
I'll let you say that it is. It's not my
Listen,
impression when I land.
I didn't put it in the top 10.
Okay.
I just said it's a good airport.
Yeah.
So no, it's easy. It's easy. Most of my work is in the Gulf and Emirates flies into KL. So I can just,
Why in the Gulf,
And,
for instance?
I don't know. I really resonate with that region. I lived in Dubai for 4.5 years. So I think that was like where it began. And I remember when I left, somebody said to me, you think you're leaving, but you won't. And I was like, no, I am. Like I literally have packed up my house. And she said, yeah, but you're going to
see
come
you in
back.
a month.
Yeah, exactly. That's what she said. I just came back from Oman, actually. Have you ever been?
No.
Oh, it's an amazing place. Really,
I have not
really
been to the
special.
Middle East.
I've been
At
to
all?
Dubai.
Any of it one time. I know
Oh
everybody
my
gives
gosh,
you a bad
Michael, we need
time.
to make you an itinerary.
No, we plan on
First
doing,
stop.
because Podster is multiple studios in the Middle East.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
plan on doing a
Dubai.
trip for like a week and then do a bunch of podcasts out of the studio
Yeah,
there.
And
it's
then,
just like this.
And then
place,
Tel
man.
Aviv, right?
Aspirational. There's
Yeah.
no studio there.
Yeah.
We gotta find a studio.
There are studios we can do that.
Yeah.
We can do it.
So we'll run out of time with all this banter, but it's great to have you here.
Thank you.
I think we're going to talk a lot about empathy and kind of dig in, because that's not just because it's the title of your book, but because we think this is a good subject.
Cool.
I'm trying to think of where to start. Kind of, why did you kind of hit on this as a core theme, this empathy in the workplace and stuff like that? I think that'd be a good way to set the
good place
stage.
to
Yeah.
start.
Yeah.
Well, back to the Middle East, because that is actually where that story began. So in 2018, the short version of quite a long story, I relocated to Dubai for a regional CEO role. And I came out of, so I had been in advertising agencies my entire career. My dad was an ad man. I was happily in advertising forever, really. And I moved there to take over a role. And when I got there, the business was, if I am being very politically correct, not doing as well as they led me to believe that it was. And the honest truth was I was totally overwhelmed. I had no idea actually how to fix that business. I had gone from big corporate roles with like 20 people in finance procurement teams and legal teams to suddenly being in a 35-person business in the Middle East. I had at that time never been. I didn't know a soul. It was Ramadan. It was about 50 degrees hot. And I remember just sitting there.
Couldn't breathe.
It was warm.
Yeah.
And I remember just thinking, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to fix this. You know, I don't have any network. It was hard. So I went to see a business coach, my first and only, and she was asking me about my leadership style at the time. And then she asked me a question that ended up changing my life, because she asked me, explain to me how you're leading. And I was speaking about intuition. I said, well, I'm an intuitive leader. And she stopped me and she said, Mimi, is it intuition or is it empathy? And at the time I said, no, it's not empathy, right? What's empathy got to do with lead? What's empathy got to do with anything, you know? But I left that lunch and I went to read up, and I discovered something called the empathy deficit, which is the lack of connectivity in our world. It's been declining for 3 decades at 48%. And I literally could not believe that nobody was talking about it. It was like I had stumbled upon like a mass trend that no one was speaking about.
Yeah.
So I started to speak, and that was the beginning.
It's amazing that the world is like more connected than ever, technically, but
Further
declining on real connections.
Yeah, totally. And now, I mean, that conversation is changing, right, guys? I mean, 5 years later, I'm here with you, right? Yeah. So I meet people all the time that say, let's talk about this. This is an interesting discussion. But 5 years ago, I would get up every day and post to my, 300 connections on LinkedIn at the time and hope that somebody was reading it. They weren't, but I carried on. And now, 5 years later, not because of me, but just because of the state of the world, that momentum is shifting and people are far more interested in what is empathy, why do we need to be connected, what's happening with the loneliness epidemic. So now it's changing, but it's been a slow build, shall we say.
Yeah.
But it's a good theme. Yeah.
But let's go to the point, because you've been in a company,
Yep.
been employee.
Yes.
And you decided to do something different. I think let's go back to that evening, to that night, or that day, I don't know when it happened, and you said, I'm quit. I'm going to do something that I think it's going to inspire others. It's a big move.
It was a big move, but it was a slow move in that I actually only quit my full-time job last November. So for 4 of those 5 years, I just did 2 jobs. So I just worked like 20 hours a day. I just kept going. I just kept balancing 2, because I came from marketing. So I knew that in order for this to be able to sustain me in any way, I needed enough groundswell first. I needed momentum. I couldn't just quit my job in 2020, especially in 2020, right? And hope that I could grow this without any income, without any base. Because as I said, nobody was talking about it then. It was hard. I remember the first ever tech conference I went to speak. And they said, well, what do you want to talk about? I said, well, I want to talk about empathy and technology. This is before AI was said every other word.
They were like, well, did we have a mistake of who we booked here?
Literally. They were like, what do you mean empathy and technology?
About organizer.
They let me do it, but it really was, hard work. But then, last, I don't know when it was, maybe October, I was on stage with Bill Gates. And that was all in the process of 4.5 years. So it went from people not even wanting to hear what I had to say to people putting me on amazing stages to say, please, can we hear what you say? And that's nothing to do with me and everything to do with the state of the world and where this message is. And people need it. People know now they need to reconnect their businesses and our world.
Yeah.
So
how do you correlate this to business success? I know maybe it's far too ranging of a question, but you know what I'm saying? Like, because if it's becoming important and you're getting this chance to speak and the books, like how do you correlate it sometimes to like, this will help you build a better business?
Yeah. I mean, the simple data point into that is that the data shows that empathetically run organizations are 23% more profitable. So once you've said that, people listen. They're like, oh, why? So fundamentally, when you have, maybe we should step back and just define what it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So empathy is at its core perspective taking, the ability to understand. It is not compassion. It is not kindness. It is not about being nice. It is not a soft skill. It's a hard skill. It's the ability to understand why somebody in your team is, doing less well after their promotion than before. Why your client of 20 years has changed their mind. understanding. It's a data set. In fact, you hear a lot about it in the FBI or in the army, for example, when people are going into war zones. So once people start to understand what this is as a skill set, which is built, by the way, into your prefrontal cortex, you're born with this in your brain. It is pro-evolutionary, but it is also pro-organizational, because once people are understood, you can help them grow. People can reach their potential. I always say to my audiences, how are you ever going to motivate someone if you don't know them? So actually, Michael, once you've uncovered what it is, the conversation to connect it to optimal business growth, to change, to innovation, 48% high levels of innovation, 17% high levels of efficiencies, lower risk, lower complexity, so many improvements.
So if you get over that wall
Easy.
a little bit, you're actually correlating it to a lot of real business things.
Because it's people, right?
Yeah.
And there is like whatever relationship you think about in your life, whether it's personal, with your family, romantic, in the workplace, your suppliers, whoever, your guests, right, on your show, you have to understand them.
Yeah.
Once you have relationships, once you have trust, everything else is easy.
What are the first challenges that you encounter when you start this process?
The process of educating people or the process of empathizing?
Empathizing.
I think the reality is that for many of us, we don't have two things. One, awareness. So a lot of my work is in this, so thank you for inviting me, but driving awareness so that hopefully someone that listens to your show goes, that's interesting, right? I never thought of empathy like that. And the other is then intentionality, being intentional about it. Empathy has two great enemies. One is high stress. The other is low time. And if we asked your audience whether they are all high stress, low time, like right, everyone says yes, right? So we need to have awareness about what this is. We need to have intention to action it. In the business world, the third step around that is measurement. So what you measure can be manifested. If you want a more empathetic organization where people listen to each other, where people value innovation, where there's high psychological safety, where people can innovate, you have to measure it. Because otherwise people just run around doing their day job, right, without thinking about it. So yeah, it's an awareness game, but it's a skill set. So like all skill sets, it needs to be trained.
So that's a great question. We had that's what you do, right? Training leaders or companies and stuff like that. What's kind of a common blockage or let's say pattern you see when you're out doing it that kind of prevents this or that has maybe prevented it from happening without the training? I'm sure there's some commonalities.
So many.
Yeah.
So I'll answer it with a story. So recently I was in Colombo in Sri Lanka. I do a lot of work in Asia. And we have an open workshop. It's open to the public. So there's a room full of people, about 60 people, none of whom know each other, different sort of stock exchange companies. And at one point, near the beginning, maybe 45 minutes in, this lady puts her hand up and I say, go ahead. And she says, Mimi, I have to tell you something. I'm like, okay, I'm all ears.
Showing empathy.
Yes, I was showing empathy. But she said, I'm 48 and I just realized I've never listened to anyone in my whole life, right? And of course, the whole room laughs and she laughs and I laugh. And when we finished laughing, she says, no, but I'm serious. She says, I just realized I don't listen to my kids. I don't listen to my husband. I'm definitely not listening to my team. That is the block. Every single workshop or keynote or whatever I do, somebody comes and says that and just says, wow, I've not been listening for my entire career. Yeah. Or, Mimi, it's really hard. And I was like, yeah, I know, right? Hence hard skill. So I think the biggest blocker is that we don't know that we're not listening, but actually we're hearing. We're not listening to understand. We're listening to reply.
Yeah.
And we're on that auto train.
So I'm curious now.
Go on.
Okay. What triggered her to make that comment? What did you say on that point? Because just imagining the room.
Yeah.
She's taking the moment for herself to ask the question, which is not easy, and she's been honest with all the rest of the people. What did you say?
Do you know what? I can't remember Raz the exact thing I said, but normally the part of the workshop when this happens is when I actually talk about parenting. So most of my work is in the corporate world. I'm not a parenting expert. I'm a mum, but I'm definitely not a parenting expert. But what I realized in this journey is that the more we talk about our lives beyond the corporate world, the more impact I can have on the room, particularly with men, actually, ironically. So I'm going to come back, but most of the feedback I get from men now, post my sessions, they'll message me on LinkedIn to say thank you or whatever. But most of their comments are something like, I think you've changed my relationship with my wife forever. Now, of course, it was actually like a corporate leadership workshop, right? So all that to say, normally the part of the workshop when this moment of clarity comes is when I ask people about their teenagers, because most people in the room have teenagers, that kind of age. And I say to them, you know, at 12, kids, look at you two, right? At 12.
I have one, so
there we go, here we go,
listening.
right? At, 12 or 13 years old, they shift and we start to say they're just never listening. Yeah. They just don't listen anymore. Yeah. And then what I ask these audiences is, did you listen to them for the last 12 years? Who did they learn not to listen from? Who,
Tables are turned.
Right? So how often, yeah, there you go, right? So how often, we get in the car after school, especially when they're a little bit smaller, and they're like, and mummy, and then I went to the playground and I dropped my cookie and all this, big for them, irrelevant. You're driving and you're thinking, did I send that email? Yeah. Must manage an alert, make sure I get to the podcast on time.
Did you get your homework done?
You're hearing, but you're not listening.
Yeah.
And then they turn 12 and suddenly we're like, well, why don't you listen? So normally, Raz, that's where it is. It's when I say, just think about that. How has that affected your relationships? And then people are like, oh my gosh, you're right. I don't think I've ever listened to them. And I think people feel a bit sad. I think that's the feeling.
Because you can't get that.
I think there's a feeling of loss. Yes.
No, I've said this before on the show, but I think it's so fundamental. I did a ICF coaching thing, and then it was like the whole course. I loved it. I learned a lot. Then it was like, hey, you got to go do your 100 hours of ICF. And I've been very transparent about 17 hours in. I was like, I hated it because I realized I didn't want to be a coach. But I'm glad I went through the process, right? But one of the things that came away from the course and kind of even led to me thinking about the podcast was the superpower for all of these things is listening.
Absolutely.
And the moment, I think it was on like day 2 where it hit me like a brick, same thing, like, I don't think I do this well. Yeah. So I'm not qualified to be a coach because I need to go figure this out. And everybody says you take these coaching courses and your first client is yourself, right? Yeah. Which is very, very true, right? Now, some people maybe move right through it. I just kind of like stopped and I said, I got to get better at this. And it's everything. It's the wife, it's the 6-year-old. And I think from that day on, I was like, because I have a 6-year-old girl, and she does that where it's like, I've heard about the cookie and the drawing and the teacher, and old me was, did you get your homework done? Yeah. Now I just let her go. And I keep kind of doing the leading, oh, really? What about that drawing? Yeah. And 45 minutes, she'll go. Now, I'm pretty sure for her, it's the best 45 minutes
for sure.
of her day, maybe. Yeah. For me, I just have to pretend I am active listening. But then I realize, oh, my God, you can do that with your coworker. You can do that with... And then suddenly everybody opens up. And then you realize that opening up is when you get to go grab the information you need to level them up, right? And then I just realized, wow, if you could just nail that,
life changes.
You can do so many things with it, right?
Yeah. And especially with children, I mean, our daughter's similar age, right? When you show them that you're listening to the cookie story in the playground, well, when they're 14 or 17 and they need to talk to you about something more serious than cookies in the playground, they trust you to listen because you have been listening. So I think it is a skill set and it's also an expectation. And one of the things I think is really important in that parenting child role is that we also teach them that, right? If you must, Michael, listen to her, she must listen to you. Doesn't matter if she's 6 or 16 or 26. Yeah. And I think that's really important. I can say to my daughter, are you listening to me? And she kind of, oh, no, mommy, now I'm listening. Right? So, because then they can learn to, then it's, we don't have to get to, I don't know how old you were when you did your coaching qualification, but we don't have to get to adult's to realize.
Just last year.
Right, so there we go, right? Oh my gosh, I haven't been listening for 10 years or 20 years, right?
Yeah. So, no, you realize you can always get better at everything anyway, right? There's always that chance to get better, but I think it kind of hits you like a brick wall that you're like, wow, I'm probably not as good as that as I keep thinking to myself I am.
Yeah.
And I think you can relate it to family and corporate and wife and
Should I tell you something amazing that happened the other day?
Sure. Yeah.
I didn't know I was going to say this, but something you said made me think of it. A week or so ago, I did a workshop in the USA online with what the state of California calls previously incarcerated people. I say that because they explained to me that all over the USA, there are different terms for people that have spent time in prison. And we did a 3-hour session on empathy in life, the role of empathy. And towards the end, this lady, and I know she had been in prison a very long time, so her crimes were big, were not small crimes. And she said to me, Mimi, you know, I think if someone had taught us empathy when we were children, we would never have hurt the people we hurt.
That's rough.
I nearly fell off my chair.
It's rough.
It's rough, but it's also amazing.
Yeah.
Right? When we talk about the power of listening, and you had that moment in ICF when you realized, wow, if I listen, things change. I don't think even for me, 5 years into this work, until that comment, which will literally never leave me now,
it's impactful.
had I realized, wow.
Yeah.
Right? Number one, how big the gaps are. Because these guys were telling me in this call, we didn't even know the word. We'd never even heard the word, let alone understood the concept.
Yeah.
There was no understanding of listening to people, understanding each other. There's just so many gaps in our world where we're not teaching these skills.
Yeah.
So I think it's like a superpower, basically.
Yeah.
You
No,
think-
that's what I love about it.
Do you think there is boundaries for be a listener? Like, can you be too much listening, or
People always ask me that.
yeah?
No, I don't think there's such a thing as too much empathy or too much listening. But I think that there is an importance around accountability, especially in the workplace. You can't listen forever. You can,
Gotta get some
right?
work
But sometimes
done.
we have to do some work, right? And your question is such a common question, I think, because
I'm a
in
common
most
guy.
teams, no, I didn't mean it like that. I just
That's
mean
okay.
lots of people
I want to
ask it.
be very normal.
Because I think in every team, there seems to be someone who likes to share a lot, which means that every leader has a question similar to that to say, but Mimi,
There's that one guy.
do I
who
have
keeps
to listen the whole time, to be a good leader? So there is, of course, there's a balance, and there's a way that we can communicate that and just explain to people. I'm really happy you shared this with me. I do have to now go to my next meeting, but I appreciate, the communication that we've had. So being able to redirect listening is also really important.
Yeah.
See, there is a framework.
There's always a framework. There's always a framework.
Yeah. So I think in Empathy at Work, you talk about frameworks, right?
Yeah.
And we always like to if you could give one person one framework that take away from this listen, what would be the good one?
Well, I have a couple of frameworks, but I think probably the easiest thing to do would be to give 3 ways to activate empathy, because it's less complicated than trying to teach a framework in a podcast. So maybe we just focus on 3 ways to really activate that.
Okay.
And I would say that the first is in eye contact. And I think we underestimate this massively, right? How important it is. And actually, when there's 2 hosts of a podcast, it's quite tiring,
Yeah, it's harder, right?
right?
Yeah. I'm
Because-
also looking at Michael once
Yeah,
in a
right?
while. Hey, Michael. Hey,
Because
Mimi.
when you take it seriously, and I do, obviously, it's
Yeah.
quite natural to me, but it's very important to me that I make eye contact with the people I'm communicating with. And it's hard work, actually. Eye contact for, an hour. It's a conscious decision. And when there's 2, you're really looking. I try to do this, by the way, with audiences of 5,000 people. Of course, you can't succeed.
Like when you're on the stage.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
something.
But I try. And the feedback that you get from that, people say things to me like, how did we feel like you knew us? That's how. I don't tell them it's because I looked you in the eye, but that is how. So the first step to being better at showing understanding and creating connection is eye contact. And if you want to know a really good way of doing that, is to try and remember the color of somebody's eyes. Because in that second where I just look a little longer to work out what color
Figure
they
it out,
are, right?
wow, it's a lot of contact.
You're right. So my conscious moment to say, are they brown or are they green? Subconsciously, for the person you're looking at, is a connective moment. So the first one I always say is eye contact. The second one, well, there's so many, but the second one probably is asking good questions, being curious. If you don't ask, you'll never know. Right? So whether you're trying to build a more inclusive team, a more productive team, a more harmonious home, if you don't ask questions, how are you ever going to know what the blockers are or why the challenges are as they are? Again, it's that idea of listening to understand versus listening to reply. So open-ended questions like, can you tell me more about that? Or how did you get to that conclusion? Even if it's with your kid, right? Why is it you think that we should do that, right? So that you can understand more. And then the third, I would say, is body language. Because when you have open body language, when people know that you're willing to listen, there's a couple of signals for that. For example, one of them is the gap between your ear and your shoulder. So when you have this, you both have it, when you have this space, just shows I'm relaxed, I'm open. If you're like this, it changes how people perceive you. Another one is hands. So if you show the palm of your hands, you'll see if you watch our recording back, I've done it a few times. Subconsciously for all humans, to see palms is very reassuring. Having open shoulders, maybe leaning slightly forward. And the fourth, I said I'd do 3, but the fourth is really important, is smiling, right? Smiling is so underrated. But if you go through life smiling, well, it's just happier for a start, but you create many more connections with people.
Do you find, I always ask this one when it comes to these things that are physical.
Yeah.
What has happened to the world post-COVID?
Yeah.
That's set us off with a lot of what you just talked about works the best face-to-face or in a room or on a stage. I'm sure it doesn't work the same on Zoom. Maybe parts of it do.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering how much of the world has gone off track, let's say on the empathy meter, because we've moved to so much less face-to-face interactions.
Look, I don't think the platform changes it. I mean, of course, the way you use that platform is different. But whether I'm having coffee in person with someone or whether I'm meeting them on Zoom, I get the same feedback, which is, I never tell anybody that. Or I want to talk to you more. Or all of this openness, you can do it whether it's on a screen or in person. I think where there might be a challenge is in the teenagers who were locked inside for 3 years at that like pinnacle, like 14 to 18 kind of age, because they got out of practice. Right? The kids will catch it up, the little ones, and we had it already, so we just maybe got a bit out of practice and got back in. But the teenagers who were in that really tricky shift time in their lives, who weren't able to practice some of these things, have struggled to come back, I think. And you hear that from parents in schools and stuff quite a lot. But I don't think it has had a lasting impact, in my experience. I think as humans, I mean, this is evolutionary. We've got like millennia behind us. So actually we knew it all.
But what about the workplace? Like,
in what way?
In the way that like we've started to become, I think there's even a reverb to it now where you see all these people demanding return to office, which I personally think is kind of a good thing. But the remote work culture is a bunch of people, even through their formative work years, became like Zoom people versus sit in an office. You know, like I comment on social media more as a tongue-in-cheek thing when I see the like whatever generation that's coming in to start work. We call them like the 20-year-olds or something. And I'm always joking like, yeah, the best way to get ahead is to wear the giant headphones sitting at your desk and never talk to anybody. Yeah. Like, wow, you're on the fast track to something. I don't know what it is. I say it more jokingly because I'm like, hey guys, the whole purpose of interning or working in an office is to interact. Like that's the thing you want to learn, right? Like you're not going to get better at the spreadsheet in your 20s or better at coding. You're going to get better at engaging, right? Yeah. And that's actually a key to probably career growth. So I always kind of joke that like, and I suspect that they became that way because for the last previous iteration, they were on Zoom and that's all they knew, right?
Potentially, and it's comfortable. Right, it's comfortable to be at home and not to sit in traffic and not to have to, you know, I don't know, put your shoes on and all of these things, right, that we have to do to go out into the world. Yeah. And, you know, to your point, I had a conversation literally last week. I have a young girl in my team. I think she's 24. She might be 25. And she has been working with me for a couple of years, but she's actually an engineering student. So she eventually has to leave me and go and be an engineer. And she was telling me that one of her, I don't know, biggest fears, but biggest concerns is that when she leaves working with me, she has to go to an office. So I said to her the same thing that you just did, literally verbatim, you know, about relationships and growth, all these things. And she said, yeah, but Mimi, when I did my internship, none of my managers were in the office. So the company mandated the juniors for these reasons, but then none of their managers were there.
No example.
Because the managers were seen as having like a benefit. So because you're now senior, you can work at home because you've done your time. But the juniors must come in because we don't really trust them. Yeah. But now there's no managers to teach them anything. So now they are in the office on Zoom to their bosses who are at home. Yeah. So, you know, the system
it's a bad example.
Yeah. The system is broken. I think, you know, as a woman, I'm not saying I'm pro or con any of it, but I tune into, because I'm female and a mother, the rhetoric around, you know, mothers and working from home and flexibility, particularly in places like the UK, where it's like an on-fire conversation about how mums, you know, they can't be mums with 2-hour commutes and in the office and all these types of things. So there's a place for it, right? There's a place for it. But there is also a critical role of human connection.
Yeah.
And to do it online, you have to be even more aware and intentional.
Almost better at it.
Then exactly.
Yeah.
And it's more energy, guys, right? When I get on a stage, it's very easy to be completely engaged with the room because you're sharing energy. 3 hours on Zoom.
Tough.
Yeah.
Right? You have to really be in it.
Yeah, I'm more worn out than a bunch of real meetings.
Right?
Yeah.
Because you have to really put energy and you have to really use your facial expressions and lean in and, you know.
It's different skills.
It's different skills.
Different skill set.
Yeah, it is.
That's the
And
way
I also think that, like, I think why some of the big companies do this return to office for everybody is to get away from the hierarchical permissioning of who gets to do what. Because it should be applied judiciously. Like, hey, we all got to go back to the office. It's not you or me. It's everybody. Otherwise, it doesn't work.
And also, some people forgot that lead by example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You need to lead by example. You cannot do the thing that you just mentioned. But maybe it's me that think, different.
Yeah. But it goes back to the children thing, right? The 12-year-old thing. If you didn't listen to them for 12 years, how can you expect them to do it now? If you don't lead these young people in the office, how can you expect them to grow and lead an office?
Yeah.
They don't know how. They don't know how.
They don't know why.
So do you think that the Gen Z generation have different demands now from their leadership?
It's not a think, they definitely do. 100%.
In which kind
in
of?
so many ways. I think, first of all, I think they're very misunderstood. The older generation.
That's us, by the way.
Yeah, definitely. I'm not going to comment whether I'm in it or out of it. I'm just going to be neutral. But the older generation, on the whole, think they're lazy. And they say it all the time, right? They tell them they're lazy. They tell them that the way they want to do things is not as good as the way they did them. So there's a lot of misconceptions around them. But having said that, they grew up into a world, not us, but the generation above us had already ruined the world in their minds, right? So they grew up around kind of World Trade Center terrorist attacks when they were small. So they grew up in a world where there was already mass media, social media. They saw everything the whole time. And they're looking at us like, hang on a minute, guys. You think you're so smart. You think you know how to run this, but do you want to look at what you did? Because our planet is sustainably collapsing.
Yeah.
We have issues across all areas of socio-economic and political landscapes. We have, I think, now 110 countries in the world in conflict right now. Yeah. But you want to tell me how to work? So you can't blame them.
Yeah.
Right? They grew up in a very complex, unstable world. And yet their leaders are saying my way or the highway. All right, I'll take the highway, thanks.
Yeah.
I'll give it a go. It's not to say they're complicated. It can be very complicated. I'm not saying they're right. But if the question is, do they want different things? Do they demand different things? Yes, because they grew up very differently.
But do you recommend, for these Gen Zs to get better on their
To them or to their leaders?
Well, it can be both, whatever.
I think for the leaders, you have to, back to listening, you have to listen. You have to really listen to understand why they're doing what they're doing. So I had a CEO in India recently say to me, Mimi, I just don't understand, because every break time they just sit on Snapchat or Instagram, or wherever they are. Don't they want to be in the real world? And I said to him, well, that is the real world, right? So when you were young, maybe you went out for a cigarette break because smoking then was fine. And you connected as you smoked. Well, today they go out and they're connecting on whatever platform they're on. Yeah. But the psychological need is exactly the same. That connection, that FOMO, that fear of missing out, wanting to be where other people are, is exactly the same. So I think leaders, we have to want to listen. We have to want to understand that we might not understand, and that's okay. But it doesn't make them wrong. It just makes it different. And then to the Gen Zs, I always remind them that empathy also has to go up, because there is a tendency to believe from their point of view that the leaders must empathize with them. You must understand me, but I don't want to understand you. Yeah. Right? If this guy is happy with email him. He doesn't know how to emoji WhatsApp.
Don't Slack him.
Right, don't Slack him. He's not on Slack, right? So, empathy goes both ways. And I think if we had more of it, the barriers would decrease.
Yeah, there was I'm bringing up Chris Williamson again because he's had some great episodes, but he had David Ramsey on. David Ramsey is so he's the financial guy, huge podcast network, live broadcasts. It's all like multiple personalities, but it's called the Ramsey Network. Okay. Not my favorite guy, but he had this question to him because people are asking him, like, he's in his 60s, I believe, and he's still the CEO of the whole thing. They're worth a few $1 billion. And he was asked the question about how do you manage Gen Zs? And he had said, one is you need to learn to listen. He said, we tend to only preach to them rather than listening. And I thought it was a good point. But a second point goes back to the office thing. He said at Ramsey, a job means you come to the office. And he said, we tell everybody that's interviewing, sorry, it's a 5-day-a-week job. If you don't like it, you probably shouldn't work here.
Yeah.
He said, but that solved the problem of they have to be around each other.
Yeah.
So in lunch and in breaks, he said the 60-year-olds got to mix with the 20-year-olds. It's forced on you. And he said we've all learned how to learn from each other. Yeah. And he said we all realize they're kind of like a secret weapon for us, and they realize that we're also an amazing asset for them. But he says I highly suspect this wouldn't have worked had we been remote, because he said we saw during COVID the success of this age group in a remote work situation. He said what we fixed it is we built a much bigger headquarters and we told everybody you must come to the office. Now he said some people quit, they don't want to.
Which is fine, by the way.
Yeah, but he said that
because
forced,
not everyone belongs.
yeah, he said, but that forced this, we must learn how to work together because offices are going to have multiple generations in them. And I kind of like that strategy, right?
I really like that. And I think, I was working with a business in Malaysia recently. They're also here, very, very big business. And they wanted to do multi-generational training. So to overcome the same gaps that this gentleman, Chris, was talking about. And they had a name for this older generation. If I'm correct, it was the old penguins. And it was a very, very lovely term of endearment. It was really loved in-house, right, this term. It was not rude or disrespectful. The older people in the business were happy. Everybody was happy. It was a very cute thing in their business. But I said to them, I understand, and I don't want to judge your terminology, but for as long as you label them something completely separate to the rest of the organization, what Chris was talking about, this intergenerational connection, will not be there. Because you are literally labeling their disconnection.
You're segregating.
You're segregating, right? So when we talk about inclusion, and often that tends to be around gender and things like that, but actually in the generations it's even more important. Because, this is a bit dark, but one of the fastest growing suicide groups is men in their 50s that get pushed out the workplace. Because they have built their art, art as in art of business, for 30 years. Suddenly they're pushed out and nobody wants, nobody wants me?
Identity.
That's my identity, but it's also my skill, it's my passion, it's my values.
Yeah.
And now you all think that because I turned 60, I suddenly can't be a banker or a lawyer or whatever they were. So it's really important that we find ways to integrate, to find that understanding between us.
Yeah, it is I'm 53 and I was looking for work at some point. And it's you wrap your whole, what am I without this job and a title and a business card? Yes, I'm still a dad, I'm still a husband, but oh crap, I'm supposed to be provider. I'm supposed to have, when I meet you, I get to say, I am so-and-so. It kind of
title from somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. It crushes you. It's.
But it doesn't have to, and I can say personally from my experience.
But I know I have. There's. I think Asia's had a lot of people laid off in the last couple of years. People don't talk about it, and Singapore's got if you don't have a job and you're not a resident,
bye.
You're out, right? And I know people have been looking 6, 7, 9 months. They're in their 40s and 50s. When you have a coffee with these people, you really get a sense of they're hurting. They're hurting, right? And it's
because they're losing their lives.
Yeah.
Not just their jobs and not just their titles. And I've been an expat for nearly 20 years.
Yeah.
I understand really how deep that is.
Yeah.
I have a house and a life, and my kids are in school and friends, and maybe I've been here for 15 years, and now you give me a few months, and I must.
To pick up and go
where? Because I haven't lived in my home country for a very long time, but I can't live in the country that I do call home. And I think, that's not why I left the corporate world, but however difficult entrepreneurialism is, and I think it is very difficult, at least I know that, right? I'm in control of my own destiny.
Yeah.
If I fail, I fail, but it was my fault. Nobody else can tell me on a Monday morning, hey, you're really good at your job, but we don't need you anymore.
It's
right?
on you.
For good and for bad, by the way. For good and for
exactly.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So we're called the Generalists.
Yes, you can see from your beautiful branding.
Thank you. What do you think of this from your own kind of journey, the notion of generalist versus specialist, and how do you kind of apply that to where you've landed?
That's a good question. Look, I came, as I said, from advertising, where I think we're all generalists, right? Actually, you'll find advertising people all over the place in different roles. In fact, I was at a dinner in Oman 2 weeks ago, and I met a man who was in defense technology for the British government. And he had to be quite private about what he did, but he was chatting at this dinner. I was opposite, just like this. And I was
listening to him.
His
name was James.
No.
Okay.
And I was thinking, I think this man used to work in advertising. But it would be weird, right? Because he's in like defense technology.
He's so specialist
right?
now, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, eventually the table moved and I got to chat, and it was later in the evening. And I said to him, what did you do before this? And he said, I worked in communications. And then I'm thinking, he definitely came from advertising. He just doesn't want to say it, right? Because he doesn't want to go from there to here. Yeah. Anyway, so we had a joke and he said, yeah, I did. I came from advertising. So, in advertising, I think the industries I came from, we are all generalists. We have a specialism in marketing, communication, but you have to learn a very wide array of relationships and different sort of technical skill sets, from data to media to just working with people to servicing clients. So probably because of where I came from, I believe in generalism. But of course, if you have a very specific skill, you want to be a vet or a doctor or a cybersecurity expert, I see the value of that. But I think in social skills, we need more generalism. There are so many gaps. This morning when I was walking through the airport, I walked past Costa Coffee. There was probably about 18 or 20 people in there. All of them were on their phones. Entirely, the entire coffee shop. Nobody was looking up at all. Not one person. Granted, it was like 5 a.m, but nobody was talking. And you have to think, where did we lose these generalist abilities just to connect as human beings? So I don't know if that's a very clear answer, but I think there's space for both. But I think generalism is what the world needs. We have many gaps to fill.
In your drive to kind of share with the world to become more empathy, a lot of it is back to communication and listening. Yeah, and then when you just described this coffee shop thing, it's almost like like no one can have any empathy in that room because they're not even talking to each other.
No.
Like, do you see that as like one of the things that like is just messed up with the world? And is that like in your books, do you talk about that a little bit? Because I've been trying myself to have like I wouldn't say it's a daily exercise, but hey, I'm going to do my best today to engage a random person. Not to go out of my way to do it so that someone doesn't think I'm weird or something, but more like...
Sometimes you're weird.
I am weird. But like if you're in the coffee shop and like next to the guy like, hey, how's it, and I've been trying to do that. And I find that like
How much success are you having?
Yeah, because, not great, I would say.
Okay.
And I'd say a couple of the reasons is because it kind of startles people because they're not actually, they're on the other side of, no one's engaging them, so they're not expecting anybody to. Of course, like the person across the counter, that'll work because they kind of think they're supposed to do that. But it's been more of like, more randomness where, again, like I said, I'm not trying to go out of my way something weird, but it could be, and it's like a practice I'm trying to do because I'm like, hey, as a human, I find it's kind of interesting to meet somebody, not in a random way of like, can I have your number? It's just more of like, oh, hey, how's it going? Or I saw you were reading, and a few people have been like, oh yeah. And then suddenly it's 10 minutes of randomness, but you kind of come away with it going like, that was a little bit interesting. Like, but
I think a lot of it's actually quite energetic, which sounds a bit like hippie, but when your energy is open, like if we were sitting in a coffee shop now, like a co-worker, and we all had our laptops, right? If I sit here just generally happy, right? My energy's open. When you look up, you're going to smile. I'm going to smile. Yeah. And when I say, can you pass me the sugar? You're like, sure. Do you work in advertising? Yeah. Do you mean the energy is open? I think so often we go about our life with closed energy. We're probably on our phones. Even when we're walking, right? We're walking to the bus on our phone or the train or wherever, right? Your energy is closed off from the world. You have to break people's energy sphere in order to get that moment. So that's why sometimes if that happens, they feel they're not ready for it, But I would say more often than not, because I fly so much, so I'm constantly on planes and in lounges next to strangers, everybody talks to me. I mean, literally everybody. I'm like, I have to get on my plane. They're like, but did I tell you about my second dog? Yeah. And I'm like, no, yeah, thank you. But I really have to catch my plane.
What started it? Because you think you're creating some openness?
I just think I'm interested in people, and I think they know that, right? I think that they can sense it, and I ask good questions. Back to that point earlier, I ask them, when they answer, I really look at them. I really look at them until they finish. And I think for many people, nobody is doing that.
Yeah.
Like no one is listening to them. So that of course becomes, this word is perhaps not the right word, but I'm going to say it anyway, quite intoxicating in that somebody's interested in you. Doesn't matter if you're like a barrister or an Uber driver or something, but if someone gives you space, most people are so lonely, 52% of us statistically, they will lean into that space. Yeah. Whether you're at work or in the coffee shop or on the train or wherever. Obviously it doesn't always work.
Yeah. No, you'll strike out a few times, but there's some...
I think it's also depending, the culture, the person.
Yeah.
If he's an inner person, it doesn't mean that it doesn't have, and I'm challenging both of you, because it doesn't mean that it doesn't have a good energy, or it doesn't want to speak, or she's not talented, or she doesn't like her. She just want to be inner. She doesn't want to speak with anyone. And it's fine.
Yeah, of course.
So not all people want to open conversations and they are open. For you, it's natural to do that, and you
For
like
me,
it.
Yeah, but I also, if I sense, so I fly a lot, and often nearly always I feel like I sit next to a man, and very, very quickly on the plane, very quickly I know whether that person's going to talk to me or not. And sometimes they'll talk to me, for the whole flight more or less, and sometimes they never talk to me. What's interesting, I flew back the other day from Saudi. This gentleman next to me, he didn't want to talk. I'm more than happy not to talk, right? I've been on business for 3 days. So I don't talk, I smile at him. I always say good morning or good evening. Half the time people reply, half of them they don't. I don't care, I say it anyway. I think it's polite if you're going to sit next to someone for 12 hours. But at the end of that flight, now we're standing up to exit. Now he wants to talk, right? So now he's like, oh, you're in Dubai. Do you live here? I say, no, I'm flying to KL, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then we talk the whole way, right? To the bus and the train and everything else, But I think generally, you're right. Some people don't want to talk. That's fine. But if you are open to people talking to you, they will talk.
Agree.
If you want that, I think we're very smart as humans. We can sense before we speak.
Yeah.
We can sense before other people speak.
Yeah, and I think I feel like this empathy thing is something you have to practice.
You do.
Right.
So I think about it.
Yeah.
It's a practice.
It is a practice.
And it can be those little things, and it could also be with the kids. It could be in work. Yeah. And I think that for me is like when I've thought about the listening, or I thought about, it's like, God, I got to practice, because if I just chat with somebody and they want to like, hey, that I can check the box of I listened and I learned something,
True.
Like I find I've been commenting on people's shirts because I don't think they expect it.
Okay.
But I think someone will wear a shirt.
You didn't comment on my shirt.
Sorry.
I'm
yeah,
feeling
it didn't
very
say anything.
I'm feeling very left out now.
So there's like, I saw a guy at the sidewalk the other day, and his shirt was like, eat creatine every day, which is a gym thing, right? But he's not really a bodybuilder or anything. And I just had to say, like, dude, your shirt's pretty funny. And he's like, yeah, I saw it. He goes, I didn't even know what creatine was, but it just sounded like something weird that you wouldn't eat. And I go, yeah, dude, it's like a bodybuilder thing. And he wasn't a bodybuilder.
Hilarious.
But I was like, shirt. He goes, I think you're the only one that's ever like asked me about my shirt on the street. And I said, like, what can I say? Like,
why not?
Yeah. But it was funny. And I laughed, he laughed, and I'm like, I think we all had a better day with just a little bit of interaction.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
I think
the reason I sent you that picture of this shirt.
Yeah, you sent me the shirt. Yeah. So it's good.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah, this goes too fast. This is great.
We're done already?
No, we're not done. We have our
wrapper.
The wrapper.
Closing that we do, that everybody gets the same questions.
Okay.
But why don't you go ahead and remind people the names of the books?
Yes.
Because I think that's important.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So I'll just recommend the one that's really selling now, which is called Empathy at Work by Mimi Nicklin, which is my name, which you can now get on Amazon and all around the world.
And people, for our Singapore people, it sounds like it's in Kino.
I hope so.
Let's check it out. I'm going to try to see if I can find it. Do you want to start? Yeah.
Okay.
So we give everybody
feel intimidated now.
No. It's
I'm very open.
I'm very open. Okay.
We end the show with the same 3 questions to everybody.
Is it about my t-shirt?
No, it's not. But we like your shirt.
Okay,
but
thanks.
I'm going to do it with a smile.
Okay, go. Eye contact, smile. Everybody, if you could show me your palms as well, like we can practice.
Question number 1.
All the empathy.
The problem with Israel is we always speak with our hands.
Well, that's not a problem. It's a good thing. It shows openness.
Some people say it's a anyway.
Different discussion.
Different discussion. What are you going to tell your 20 years old, what you know today?
What I would tell 20-year-old me?
Yes.
To be patient. That was easy, actually, because I think the world is so fast and we all want everything now, literally like now, tomorrow, and it's just not realistic. I mean, you can probably have it. If you have enough money, you can have everything now, but I think one of the things I've learned most on this journey is just how important patience and consistency, but patience is. Good things will come. If the intention is right, you will get there. It will happen. But don't believe social media, because social media will make you believe that every successful entrepreneur did it overnight, right? They don't ever show what's happening in the background, or the reality that happened all night to get there, or how it is to write a book or launch a podcast, or the money that it costs, right? Yeah. So I think my 20-year-old message would be to really understand the value of patience. Just be patient. It's coming.
Have you had to deal with that even now for yourself? Like in
I tell myself
the book journey and the business journey?
Yeah. I mean, even now I have to remind myself all the time. I say to myself, 10-year journey, not 10 minutes. Especially when something goes wrong, but maybe I reach out to you to be on your podcast and you say, no, we're not interested in you. Obviously in that minute you're like, oh, they didn't like me. Maybe maybe they didn't think I'm interesting. And of course it's very easy to get caught in that moment of the day. But other things are coming, right? I always believe that what's meant for you will come for you. Just be patient.
Takes time.
And sometimes you can get 10 times no, and the yes that you're going to get is going to worth, the entire, thing that you want to have.
Do you tell your kid to be patient too?
All the time.
Yeah.
She's not great at it. She's only 7.
Be patient.
It's like it's an ongoing journey, let's say.
Yeah. Give her time.
Yeah,
with a smile.
Yeah.
I guess mom has to be patient, not kid.
Yes.
Right? Exactly.
Endlessly patient.
Got it. What do you do for health, whether it be physical, mental, kind of what's your regime, especially with all the traveling and the books and stuff? How do you stay level-headed?
Well, I do I'm vegetarian. I'm also gluten-free, so I'm very conscious of what I eat and what I put in my body because I travel.
We didn't offer her a beer.
Yeah, very good. But so I'm very conscious of what I eat, and I think it's harder when you travel for business. Even this morning, by the time I got here, I'm starving hungry. To now be vegetarian and gluten-free, like in an airport, you have to plan for
Asian
that,
airport.
Right? Yeah, in an Asian airport, there's noodles and everything, noodles or rice, right? Not that rice has gluten, but yes, I'm very conscious of what I eat. I'm very conscious of how much I sleep. I don't always win, but I'm conscious of it. I try to make sure that I sleep properly, and I just try to move. I think in my work it's very hard for me personally to keep up any level of fitness, anything. I start and I stop and I start and I stop and I start and I stop. And I used to feel really guilty about that. But then I came to the conclusion that progress is better than perfection. If you aim for perfection, you'll fail. You'll just be endlessly disappointed, right? So I just try to move, whether that's going to the gym or going for a swim or walking the dogs. I walk my dogs a lot. It's like my peace moment. But just making sure I move. So I'm very conscious of it. And I think me and my partner, we plan a lot for where we hope our future health will come from. In terms of, if there's supplements we're taking or the type of house we want to buy or the type of lives we want to lead. It's probably more around mental health. But having seen my own parents age and learning from perhaps how I wouldn't want to age, I spend quite a lot of time consciously, I'm not planning for retirement, but just planning for how I want to age. I don't think I'll ever retire, but I know what country I want to live in. And I know what type of house I want to live in. I know I don't want to end up in Europe in an apartment. So I have a plan.
Going back to England is not in the plan.
It's not in the plan. So more around emotional health, I would guess.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I've been thinking about this thing more and more with like retirement, where it's like, is it even a concept? I'm like, I want to be busy. Yeah. Maybe it's changing exactly what I want to do on my terms, and
you can choose. You want to have the ability to choose, the freedom.
But the whole like doing nothing scares me more than.
I say to my audiences all the time, do you really want to watch Netflix for 25 years?
No, kill me.
Exactly, right? So I think you're right. I think the definition has totally changed. For me, I was with a personal finance planner the other day, and he said, so what age do you want to retire? And I looked at him, I said, I don't want to retire. Yeah. And why would I ever retire?
Yeah.
I love what I do. I can still do it at 90. I'll do it,
No, I was listening. I don't know if you're into Warren Buffett and Berkshire Hathaway, because he announced his retirement. I've listened.
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah, on CNBC podcast, they have all 3 hours of it, which I've listened to almost all of it.
He had lots of amazing nuggets, actually.
It was amazing, because I have always listened to it. And he finally threw it. He just said, hey, I'm hanging up my spurs. And, and he talked about, like, because he's 94. And he's like.
Is he 90?
He's 94.
I listened to it. I didn't know he was.
Yeah.
Sure, that's amazing.
And he had said that, like, And he's funny because him and Charlie used to say, we eat whatever we want, we do what we want. They don't exercise, we're fine, we eat hot dogs. You know, he's at McDonald's every day. But what he said is he's pretty sure that if he wasn't busy and felt compelled to keep being in his game, he sure felt like I would have died or aged out much earlier.
Yeah.
I think that's very true.
It's purpose, right?
I've seen it with my own father as well.
Yeah, it's purpose.
When he retired, he got less well. Right? I think part of that is purpose because it's so critical to our health. And part of it is connectivity. Back to where we started the show. Lonely people die statistically 8 years earlier. And when you retire, many people become lonely because they leave their ecosystem.
Yeah.
So there you go. Note to every listener: never retire.
Don't retire. Don't retire.
Last thing. Last one.
Okay, I'm ready.
Share with us a book or something that you watched, not on Netflix. I'm just joking.
Other than your own book, because we covered that.
No, I'm not going to talk about mine.
Or podcasts that you like.
That I like.
Yeah.
I don't have one off the top of my head. I listen and I read so much. I can't even think of anything that feels like educational. But what I will tell you is I just read a book called The Corner Store by the Sea, I think it's called. I've probably got the title wrong.
I'll look it up, don't worry.
Well, you have to put like a disclaimer that says Mimi messes up the name.
No, I'll find
Please
it.
actually look for this one. But it's a beautiful, charming story about a community that is by the sea and is surrounded around this corner store. And it just reminds you of our humanity, right? Actually what we're here to do. It's a story. It's not an educational book. But I found it really beautiful. And then the other one is a book from Japan. Again, I'm going to get the name wrong, but it's something like The Man Who Gave Away Advice for Free. I'm paraphrasing.
I'll look it up. Yeah.
That one is true. And it's about a young Japanese man who he's very, it's translated to English obviously, but he's very like blunt. And he just says, I was really bad at work. Like everything I did, I was terrible at. So I thought, well, I'd quit it all and see if I could just charge for my time to spend my time with people, but I'm actually really bad with people. But I tried it anyway. And he, in a truly Japanese style, went totally viral. And now, still to today, people book and pay online for him to come and just spend time with them. So he might come and sit at dinner and not talk. So they might just say, come, I don't want to date you, I don't want to be your friend, but I don't want to go to dinner on my own. So can you just come and sit there? Or someone will say, there's all these stories in this book, you should read it. I have a real passion for yellow outfits of, huge mice, but I'm too scared to go down the road on my own. So will you walk behind me while I walk down the road in costume? All of these crazy, crazy requests.
Crazy.
Only in Japan.
Yeah, exactly.
It's Mars. It's
amazing. And this book is just like, I haven't finished it, but it's this whole book. It's true, totally true, of all the things that came to him from the World Wide Web, of people saying, actually, do you know what? I need someone to come and do this weird thing with me. Like, would you come and play Scrabble with me? I don't want to talk. Don't tell me your name. Don't tell me anything. Just come and play Scrabble. So he would go and play Scrabble. Amazing. Amazing story. Because again, it just reminds you of how important it is to be connected. Like how much we need each other, even when we don't know each other. Yeah. So I think I probably answered that terribly with 2 books, but I don't even know the names of either of them, but they're good reads.
You did a storytelling, which is also good.
Yeah, good stories.
Where do people find you? Like, what's the best way to catch up on you other than the boats?
They probably would find me online, so on LinkedIn or Instagram or YouTube. But Instagram and LinkedIn are my platforms, both of them at Mimi Nicklin.
Got it.
Insta, I share more of the journey. It's a bit more holistic, and LinkedIn is a little bit more around leadership. Cool. But yeah, that's where I love to be.
This is great. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming.
I'm so happy I flew in and we did it.
Yes.
Yeah. So
we're glad
really
we
awesome.
made it happen. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.